Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss. I'm Shelley Carney, and this evening I'm in Santa Fe. We're at the Children's Museum, which is right across from the Santa Fe Center for Contemporary Arts, where this evening we will be visiting and a screening of The Lure, which is a feature documentary about the Forrest Fenn treasure hunters. And I am speaking with the director, Tomas Leach. Hi, Thomas.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming today. And tell us about your experience as a filmmaker.
So I grew up in the UK and studied at an art college there. I studied film. And then from there I went to work in Italy at a place called Fabrica for a year, making short documentaries, short commercial pieces. Mm-hmm. And from there I just kind of grew as a filmmaker. I made a lot of short documentaries. I made a series about them. I made some for television. And then in 2013, I made my first feature documentary, which is about the photographer Saul Leiter, which is called In No Great Hurry. Mm-hmm. And all along the while, I've been directing commercials, most recently with a company called Moxie Pictures.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it seems that when you take on a documentary, not only do you need to have an interest in the topic, but you need to have a driving passion to not only produce it, but finish it and then distribute it. So what was it about this particular topic that drew you in and gave you that driving passion?
I mean, that's very true. You do. I think whenever I talk to younger filmmakers, I always say you have to absolutely love it, because that instinct of what you loved about the story when you're 3 years into the project and completely snowblind, you need to keep. And for me, this was such a kind of childlike, intoxicating story that has enough nuance and depth that you can constantly unearth something else. So to me, it's the universality of it. It touches people in different ways. It means different things to different people. And whenever I was losing kind of energy or down with it, you just can approach it at different angles because it's a lot to it in that way.
And speaking of angles, there's a lot of different angles you could come at with this story. You could talk about Forrest Fenn and being an art collector in Santa Fe. You could talk about the treasure, what's in the treasure, and how it was hidden. But you chose to focus mostly on the searchers. What made that decision for you?
Well, I think there's been there's an abundance of material about Fenn and the treasure itself in a kind of factual way. Lots of news pieces, Today Show, articles, interviews, all of this stuff. And to me, that was great. But for me, I wanted to make a movie. And to make a good movie, you need strong characters who you're going to go on a journey. And Forrest is an elderly man, and he's a fairly closed man in some ways. You know, he's not going to open up secrets of this story to me or anybody else. And to me, he's the starting point for the story. And he's definitely the starting point for the film. He stays involved, and he's the mystery, but he's the guy who set this up. So to me, to make a story that really lasted feature length, it was important that we got characters who could take you on a journey, who could learn something, who would have ups and downs, and who maybe you could identify with. And so the biggest part of the process for us was finding those people who you'd go on a journey with, who you can empathize with, who you can laugh and love and laugh at and laugh with and feel bad for or feel bad against, you know, because there's many different angles on the hunt itself, and there's very many different kind of personalities involved. So all the characters that are in the film, I felt could take you on a journey.
Great. Okay. This is fun. So was there something, what would be most interesting or challenging about making this particular film?
I mean, all of it's challenging. Filmmaking as a start is challenging, but particularly this film is that it's unbelievably difficult terrain. So anytime any of our hunters wanted to go out, even on a light hike with film equipment is a tough ask. And, you know, we were wading rivers, we were climbing mountains, we were going on 7-hour hikes with them. You know, it's a physically tough and challenging thing. And because the story's so open, there are so many different paths you can take with the story. And sometimes that's a challenge as well as a filmmaker. It's not we're not retroactively telling the story of how somebody got to from point A to point B. This is a myriad of different lives crossing each other and interweaving in a huge, physically vast landscape. So geography is tricky, understanding the geography is tricky, and pulling the characters through and remembering what the thread of the story is the hardest part.
So what was the size of your film crew?
Well, I think to understand the kind of process of a film crew, I came out here on my own for the first time at the start of 2014 to meet Forrest and to get a sense of Santa Fe and where the story like this could start. And I didn't film anything. I just came out to meet Forrest and understand, did I think this was all just a gimmick? Did I think it was a tourist thing? Was it, was there any depth to it? Was there any meat on the bones for the story? And to understand this place, because I'd never been to New Mexico before. So I came out at the start of 2014, then came back a few months later with a crew. But it was just so slow moving with a crew because you're the physicality and you're at the whim of somebody's latest reasoning as to where they're going. So planning a film like that means you need to drop all of that stuff. And it ended up being most of the time that I was shooting me and 1 or 2 assistants.
And what type of equipment were you using in the field?
I used a Canon C300 and a set of different lenses, radio mics, shotgun mics, and a lot of different handheld rigs. But the Canon C300 is a camera that I went with and I really love.
Great. I know we have some filmmakers watching who are going to be interested, so I always have to ask.
I mean, it's before even starting the film, and when I was thinking about what we should shoot on, I saw a fiction film called Blue Ruin, and then I'd seen a little bit of stuff from Cartel Land, and they were both shot on the C300, but both stood up as huge cinematic films. And to me, it was really important that we did something that stood out from all the other short documentaries, and there's hundreds, and all the other news pieces, and there's hundreds, and all the photos of Forrest and the story, of which there are tons. It was important that we did something that stood out visually and was the most movie-like.
So you're the cinematographer as well as the director, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're pretty much a small crew, you do most everything, right?
Yeah, it had to be, to take other people on a kind of, some of the wild goose chase stuff is a tough ask. It
is. We do it too. I know. So, going on to our next question. You've met and spoken with dozens of searchers as you were putting this film together. What have you learned about them as a unique group of people?
Well, I probably spoke to about 100 from the UK first in interviews or phone calls or Skype conversations. And it's really hard to lump any group as disparate as that together with any kind of traits. But I would say that the treasure itself attracts dreamers or people who there's something, they have some kind of yearning inside to go out in the world and find something. It catches on different people. And that, I would say, unifies them all. But it's a pretty soft universal theme. I mean, I think most 8-year-olds also have that dream. So that's a good thing. Okay.
So having met all of these people and gotten all that life experience along with them, do you have any advice to any watchers today who are either new or experienced at searching for treasure?
Yeah, well, I think as to the actual treasure hunting, I don't know if I have too much advice, but I think that one thing you'll see from watching the film is that everybody on the journey, everybody in the film was getting something from this that wasn't the treasure itself. Either a searching of their own soul, a spiritual connection, an understanding of the land, exercise, connection with family members, and it's important to remember that the journey that you're on as well as the end goal. And I think, it's an incredibly difficult thing to find, if not borderline impossible, in a huge part of the world, which is very wild. So don't have all your hopes pinned on that, because there's so much you can enjoy along the way, which sounds like a very woolly answer. But I think that lots of the people are actually taking that to a deep extreme. I think a lot of people have really found it as a way of testing their own virtue, one of the characters in their film says. You know, it's his way of understanding himself. And I think that that's important to remember. I mean, there's a whole load of practicalities. Take lots of water. Don't go in winter, you know, things like that, which don't underestimate the landscape ever. It's a wild and dangerous place.
Did you have any accidents or animal encounters or anything?
Not too
dangerous?
many, like nothing scary. And not, you know, and because we were always at least 3 people, it's different because even if we're just following one treasure hunt, it would be plus me, an assistant. And you tend to make too much noise to really find any great animals in that way. You know, we got our car stuck on a mud track. We get, you know, and we got rescued by New Mexico police. Yay. You know, for that. And but you know, as the cop told me, he said it's the people you want to watch out for.
Oh, right. It's true. So, after all these travels and all this searching, what, in your opinion, when and where will the Forrest Fenn treasure be found?
I don't know. I get asked a lot about whether I think it's... I mean, the first question a lot of people ask when they just hear the idea of the film, is it for real? Which I'm most of the way along to believing. Yeah. But even, I mean, there are areas and shade in all of this. And as to when and where, I have no clue whatsoever. And I don't know if it matters so much. You know, it's the end of a story if it gets found. And we definitely set out when we were making this film that we would never rely on it ever being found. Because if you start planning for it, it's definitely not going to happen. So we were of the mind that this story has to have enough depth and interest that if the treasure's never found, it's still interesting. And, you know, this is the perfect part of the world for that. There's so many untold stories or so many kind of half-told stories or myths about hidden treasure or buried gold or the lost fortune of someone or a mine that's closed down that if you can just get to it, you'll find a fortune. You know, it's great because this part of the world's full of story like that.
Well, we've watched a lot of videos of other people searching for the treasure, videos they've put together, and we find that a lot of times they go off gung-ho, they're very excited, they know what they're doing, they know where they're going, they're looking and they get to about the middle of the poem and then they're lost and they're like, now what? And then the whole video just falls apart, there's no ending, they never come back and tell you what happened. Right. So how did you avoid that, knowing you weren't going to find the treasure and, you know, there's no ending?
All great films are stories about people. You know, the story is one thing, but the characters and the people are what really matters. And the people, I think, in my film are fascinating people who you can empathize with and who give you a different insight on life. So every time I wasn't looking for an ending of necessarily finding the treasure. It's always, what's this person feeling, experiencing, growing? How do we connect with them? What do they teach us about ourselves? So as long as we always brought it back to character, it didn't become too disappointing.
Great.
And it's many characters. You know, that's the other thing. To me, a great inspiration was always Nashville, the film, the Robert Altman 70s film, because it's so many characters interwoven that give you a picture of place and story by their kind of volume. Right.
Great. Okay. That makes sense. And so tell us about what's coming up in the future. This is a sneak peek tonight. So tell us about where the lure is headed from here.
So we're still playing film festivals, and this is a special screening because I thought it was important that Forrest see it, his family see it, and I wanted to show it in Santa Fe because I spent a lot of time here whilst making it, and Jason at the CCA, in fact, was really helpful even along the process. So it's great to be able to bring a film back once you've taken some of the story away from a town. It's great to be able to bring it back. Right. We'll carry on showing some festivals through the summer, and then hopefully we'll have small theatrical release towards the fall. And then it will be, once we've had a small theatrical, it will be streaming and the usual different avenues, but theatrical here and in the UK.
Okay. And what about you? Do you have any ideas for the future? What projects you're going to be working on?
Yeah, I've been writing a couple of fictional features, so that's a long, slow road too. But I've been fairly far along one of those projects, and that might happen within the next 18 months. We'll see. But that's one thing. And then there's a sports feature documentary which I'd like to make, and we're just talking about that very early at the moment. It depends on which characters we might find for it.
Terrific. So do you have an affinity for documentaries, or?
Yeah, I love the form. I think it's, for me, they're a little undercooked sometimes. They could be more cinematic. They could be better in terms of music and the way they feel or sound. They should be more of a filmic event. But I love the art form. And there's people now, I think the form's shifted in the last few years, and people are making incredibly entertaining movies. And sometimes the label documentary is a bit of a drag because you feel like you're going to learn something or be taught something, whereas actually you're taking on this amazing, larger-than-life story with incredible characters. So it's that part of documentary I love dearly.
Terrific. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Thomas.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you for watching. And we want to give a thanks also to the Santa Fe Children's Museum for offering this space for our interview today. For A Gypsy's Kiss, I'm Shelley Carney. Thanks for watching.